Right, so now the next thing that we'll need to do is to go into the main activity now. So on the main activities layout file, we've got nothing yet there. So let's just go into the text, and I'm going to change this to a linear layout. And I'm going to set the orientation to be vertical, horizontal, vertical. And then I'm going to remove this text view. So what we want to drag in here is then now the recycler view. So I'm going to drag in the recycler view there, and you can see that we have the width and we've got the height there. So we can add another property there that will just say Android ID and just give it an ID of, let's call it list. So now if you go to the design view, you will see that you have now a list of items there on the screen. So don't worry about how that look now. So we've got the ID there, and the ID is called list. Now let's go and set that up in the main activity. So in the main activity, I'm going to have a few declarations at the top. I'm going to start with the recycler view, and I'm going to call this recycler view. So we're going to link up that one now. And then I want to have RecyclerView.adapter. And I'm going to call that adapter my adapter. We'll come back to that one also. And then we're going to have a RecyclerView.layout manager. We read about the layout manager. So we need to use some sort of layout manager to help us out here. So that's the three variables that we'll need. And if you need to have a look at the import statements, just make sure that they are the same for the recycler view there. It's version 7 widget. Okay. Then inside of your onCreate method, we're going to set the recycler view equal to find the view by its ID. And now I want to refer to this list that I just created. I think probably need to clean again. So go to build and clean your project if your ID is not showing up. Right, let's try again. And I'm going to go to list. So in your activity main, we called this ID for the recycler view, we called it list. So now in your main activity, we're setting it up. So our recycler view is that list. Then we're going to also call recycler view.set has fixed size, and we're going to set that to true. And that just makes sure that your recycler view is not changing depending on the size of your different items that's in the list. So this also has an effect on performance, so it's very good if you can set this value to true. It affects your performance very positively. Then we're going to go to the layout manager, and we set the layout manager. So the layout manager will be a new linear layout manager, and I'm just going to pass in this keyword, which is referring to the main activity. So we're going to use the linear layout manager of the main activity. And then on the recycler view, I'm going to set the layout manager, and the layout manager will be this layout manager. So obviously you don't need this variable, and you can just pass in new linear layout manager directly into set layout manager. So now the next thing that we'll have here or need here is the array list. So now this array list could come from anywhere. You can get this from a database or wherever. We're just going to hard code it for now. And it's going to be an array list that will have person objects. So let's just call it people again. And then after this, we'll say people equals new array list. And let's make it also of type person. Right, and then we can just add a few there. So I'm going to say add there, and this will be a new person object. And now remember, in your person class, there's the constructor. We accept a name, a surname, and a preference. So I'm just going to say new person there, the name, let's say John, the surname as a string, Rambo. And then as the preference there, let's say John Rambo uses the bus. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to copy this quickly. And let's add one for Chuck Norris. And let's say Chuck Norris will also be using the bus. And we'll have Peter Jennings here, whatever. And we'll use the plane there for that guy. And let's add another one there, Tom Cruise, and he will use the plane as well. Okay, so there's a few people that we have in the list, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it a few times so we have a nice big list of people. Right, so now after we've created our array list or connected to a database and we've got our array list, in this case we just hard-coded it, we can now go and set the adapter for our specific RecyclerView. So we'll go to my adapter, which we declared at the top. So my adapter is the adapter, the RecyclerView adapter. And I'm going to use now my custom adapter that I created, which we called person adapter. So it's the one that we spend most of our time on, this one. Now remember, we've got a constructor there that accepts this array list, but it also accepts the context. So I'm going to say new person adapter, passing in the context, which is the main activity. So I'm just passing in this, or you can pass in main activity.this. And the second argument is the list of person objects. So it's called people in the side. So what will happen now is it will go to the person adapter. It accepts that list there. It sets the list to this array list. And now it will do all the rest for us. Okay, so after that, after we've got the adapter, we need to go to the RecyclerView and call set the adapter for me. Which adapter? The one that we just created, my adapter. Now let's just test this one out quickly. So run it on a virtual device and let's see how this runs. Right, and there you can see a nice list of items. So you can see John Rambo, Chuck Norris, and so forth. Now to get this list looking a bit better, we can use this card view that we talked about. So let's see how we can implement the card view to make this list look a bit better. So you can see basically it's the items that we had there. And the first one is John Rambo with a bus. So it shows the bus picture. The second one is also a bus. The third one is a plane. And the fourth one is also a plane. So it's showing the picture depending on what you pass in for that specific object. So let's see if we can display this a bit better. So what I want you to do is to go into your list items where we created this. And we're going to add something. So just outside of this linear layout that is now vertical. You remember that we created, or we implemented in our build.gradle file, we implemented the CardView library. So we're going to refer to that CardView library now. So we're going to open our own tag there and go to Android. You can see there Android.support version 7 widget CardView. So that's the one we want. Now for the width, we're going to set the width to matching the parent. We're going to set the height to wrap content. And then you can open up that card view. So there's a few other settings that we can also set now for this card view. And one of the first ones is to go and set XML NS, and then we're going to refer to card underscore view equal sign, and then you're going to use HTTPS or HTTP, and you'll see there's one that says res auto at the end. So this one is the one we want. And now we can add the rest of it. Okay, so after that statement, we'll add the card background color. So the background color you can choose for that specific card layout. You can do anything there. So I'm just gonna go with a color code of hash D3D3D3, and you can see it's basically a light gray type of color. So that's the background color for the card view. Then we can also have a corner radius. So you're going to have the card corner radius, and that's just the radius for your corners. And I'm going to leave this at 5 dp, but you can obviously make changes there to make your corners less round or more round. Then we're going to work with the elevation. So that's the card elevation. Make sure it's this one, card view, card elevation. And that is basically how high up in the air do you want that card to show. The higher up it is, the bigger this value, the more of a shadow you will see. So you can play around with that value also. So that's the card elevation. And I'm going to use compat padding. You can also play around with the compat padding to set it to false or true and see what happens there if you set it to true. So it opens up too much space for me if you use this compat padding. So make sure that's set to false. And then we'll just use a layout margin there. So I'm going to say layout margin, and that's the normal Android layout margin. And I'm going to use a margin of 7 dp. So instead of using card use compat padding true, I'm going to set my own margin for 7 dp. Right, so after your card view is now done, what I want to do is to take the rest of this layout. So you can see we're in the linear layout and there's only one closing tag. So just before your last linear layout closing tag, I want to take everything. So basically everything that I had in the layout, I'm going to cut them. So I only have the card view, and I'm going to place that into the card. Now, if you go to design, you'll see that your design now looks like this. This is now your card view. I actually don't like this color there. So let's just go to text again. And let's replace this with an F6, F6 and see how that looks. Just put a hash there. Okay, so let's go back to design. And that looks a bit better. Okay, so this is the card view then. And you can see that on the card view, I can just click somewhere else, the round edges there. So you can go and play around with these values on the card elevation and the corner radius and stuff like that. So we can even make it a 3 there to see your edges are then not that round anymore. So let's run this again and see how it displays. And this is how it's displaying now. So now we have the card view implemented. So this looks a bit better than what we had. Okay, so now let's go and have a look at the click events. If I want to click on one of the items in this list now, what do I need to do? So if you go to your person adapter class again, you remember that we've implemented an on-click listener there. So if you want to, you can directly do what you want to do right in this on-click listener. But if you want to reuse this coding, this would probably give you some problems. So what I suggest you do is to create an interface here that you can send back to the main activity, which one was actually clicked. So I'm going to use a public interface. Let's call it interface there. And it's going to be item. Let's just say item clicked there. Now in the item clicked interface, we'll have one method that will help us to get that index on where it was clicked. So I'm going to say on item clicked, and then we're going to pass in there an integer, and that's just the index on where was it clicked in the list. Now you remember this context that was passed in, and this context will basically now be your main activity. So let's go to the main activity and we implement this interface. So in the main activity, I'm going to implement that interface there, implements, and it's called item clicked. So just have the interface there, alt enter on it, and say implement that on item clicked method. So basically when we get the context here, we want to set this context now to a variable that we can use to activate this method. Okay, so let's see if we can declare a variable there at the top that is of the same type as this interface. Let's just go into item clicked, and I'm going to call this activity. So remember that the context here is referring to an activity that's using this person adapter. In our case, it's the main activity. So what we're going to do here also is to go and say this activity that we created there, that's of type item clicked, will be, if I convert it to item clicked and using this context, let's just say context there, I will then basically have a connection to the main activity or any other activity that's using this adapter. So you can see then context refers to the main activity. Remember here where we said my adapter equals new person adapter, we pass in this. This is referring to the main activity. So it's actually the main activity that gets passed in here, and we're converting that main activity to an item clicked. Can we do that? Yes, because the main activity implements item clicked. So there's is a relationship. So the main activity is a item clicked. So here where we say convert that thing that's already an item clicked to an item clicked and not a context anymore, then we now have a connection to that activity. Now with that connection to the activity, we can then call this method and pass through where the index was clicked. So in the adapter, let's go down. In your view holder, this is where we want to add the coding now. If it gets clicked, we want to send through, using that method, to the main activity which index value was clicked. So we'll refer to the activity variable. So we're going to say that variable, and the only method that you can call on that variable is the method that you defined inside of item clicked, which is this on item clicked, but it's also the method that we have there, so which is fine. So on activity, we're going to call on item clicked. And now we want to pass through the index. Where did we click it? But we don't have the index here. But what we do have is where we've set this as a tag. So we've said viewholder.itemView.setTag, and this is the tag. It's the whole object. So now on this side, you can see that there's the item view that was passed in. And if I set an on-click listener on this item view, I can also refer to that view there. So basically what I'm going to do is to go into my people array list. I'm going to get the index of this object that we have the tag of. So I'm going to say index of view.getTag. So there we set the tag as people.getI, which is a person object, and there we call getTag. But just to make sure it's of the correct type, we will convert this to a person object to make sure that it is the correct type of object that we're getting the index of. So in the people array list, we will then get the index value of this object that was tagged, which we tagged in this line of coding. So then basically we send through what is the index value that it was clicked on, and by doing that it activates this method, and there we have the index. And now it's easy, we can just go and display a toast there, or you can start a new activity or whatever you want to do based on that value. So now we know in which index was it clicked in this people array or array list. So we can just go and say the surname, sorry, not there. Let's go down there. The surname for the person that was clicked will be in the people array or array list dot get the specific position, which is the index, and we're going to call get surname. And I can also display the name and whatever in the exact same manner. Let's run this again and see if the click value now works. Right, so there's the list again. If I click on an item in the list, it gives me the surname. So if I click on Peter, it should give me Jennings. If I click on John, it should give me Rambo. If I click on Tom there, it should give me Cruz. So I think this click is working 100%. Now just one more thing when working with lists. Let's say that after a while your list changed and you want to update your list. How can you do that? So in the main activity, I'm just going to add another component there. I'm going to drag in one button just in front of the list. Right, so there's the button just in front of the list, and I think for the rest of it should be fine. I'm just going to leave the button as it is. Let's just call it add there, and we're going to call it btn add, and go to the main activity, and let's just set up that button quickly. I'm going to say button btn add equals find the view by its ID, r.id.btn add. Okay, so for some reason it's not picking up, so let's just clean again, go to build and clean your project. Right, and then we've got btn add, it's connected there, so just make sure that that one is actually called btn add. Right, so we've got the button there. Let's set an on-click listener on that button. On-click listener, new on-click listener. And then inside of this on-click listener, let's add now a new object to this people array list. So I'm just going to copy one of them and I'm going to paste there, and let's take somebody totally different. Let's take Susan Peters and let's leave it at plain. So every time we click the button, it will add a new person called Susan Peters, just to see if this works. So if we run this again, you will see that we've got the button at the top and we've got the list view, so which is 100% fine, but you can't see any Susan value there. Okay, so if I click on add, it should now actually add new Susan Peters, but if you look at your list, nowhere still you'll see Susan Peters. So in order to make sure that this one is then also added to the list, you will go to your adapter called my adapter, and you're going to say notify dataset changed. So it's going to notify the adapter that this array list, which is the data set, has changed, and it must include the new values. So let's run this again and see if it works now. Right, so there's the list again, no Susan. Let's click on add, scroll up, there's Susan Peters. Click on add again, scroll up just a bit more and you'll see a second Susan Peters. Click on add again and you'll see another Susan Peters. So it's dynamically updating your list, and a RecyclerView is very nice in doing this for you. Now we're basically done for this video. Just want to show you something interesting also. if you go to your layout manager, let's take this one line there and we play around with it a bit. So I'm going to go to the layout manager, and you'll see that this layout manager has got a few more arguments that you can pass in. So I'm going to use linear layout manager, and you can see that we can set it now to horizontal. So currently our list view or our list is vertical, so we can set our list to be horizontal, and then the last argument, I'll talk about that now. I'm going to set it to false for now. So if we run this now, let's just comment out one of the two. So I'm going to comment out that one, and this is our new linear layout manager, and run it again, and you'll see something interesting now. So now instead of having a linear layout that is vertical, we'll have one that is horizontal. So there you can see it, and I can scroll through my list horizontally. Now you can see if I get to the end of my list, you can see that the list is actually spanning the whole screen still. So even if I try to put some other content here, you will not see it. So what you can do then is to go to, let's go to the main activity. Instead of having this list view match the parent, you can just set it to wrap content, and then you can add some other components underneath it again if you wanted to. So now if you run it again, you'll see that, let's see if it runs now. Right, you can see now if I drag it, it's only that small top part at the top, so we can still use the bottom part, and now it's scrolling nicely. Okay, so the false value that I passed in as the third argument there, where are we now? That third argument will just basically say reverse the layout, yes or no. So reversing the layout means that my list view starts now from left to right. So if I put a false or a true value in there, my list view will start from right to left, which means I will start scrolling to the right. So you can play around with that value. Then another value or another thing that we can also do here, let's just take that one line again, and we comment out this one. We can also set a new grid layout manager. Now for the grid layout manager, we're also going to pass in this, which is just the main activity, the context, and then we're going to say grid layout manager dot horizontal, and also you can set true or false there. So let me just set false there again. I forgot about one argument there, so let's just add a 2 there, and I'll explain the 2 also. That's just how many items you'll have per row there in the grid. So it's the context, your span count, which is horizontal or however you want to scroll, and then reverse the layout false again. So let's just see the grid layout quickly. And it could be that it will not show correctly, so you need to go and define your layout for the type of grid layout or the layout manager that you're going to use. So let's just look at this one. Okay, so you can see then on this grid layout I have a span count of 2 there. So I have them now 2 by 2. They're going through, and I can also, let's say, make it 4. Run it again. I can have 4 of them scroll from left to right, and there's all the components. Okay, so remember that last value there indicates whether you start from the right to the left or from the left to the right. And then also you can use this as vertical, and let's see how the vertical one looks. And then you have it vertically like this, which is not showing very nicely. So maybe let's just have 2 there. Obviously you're going to change your layout for every item in the list view depending on the layout manager that you'll use. And there you can see now it's a smaller one, but we've got a grid layout with 2 in each row. Okay, so this is basically it for your list view. So let's see if we add one there. You'll see now if I click on add, it adds it there at the bottom. Click on add again, it adds another one there at the bottom. So also your add will work with no matter which type of layout you use. If I click on adding there and adding, I will basically keep on adding to this whole list view. Okay, so that is it for the RecyclerView. I hope that you've learned a lot in this video. So in a next video, we'll have a look at how can we include this RecyclerView also. Remember, this is an in or on top of a normal main activity or normal activity. So we'll see in the next video how we can do this RecyclerView also with fragments.